My wife, Laura, was on the couch. The man with her was younger, lean, cocky. He had that smug air of someone who thought he'd won, that he was in control. His hand trailed along her thigh as she whispered something into his ear, something that made his grin widen. My stomach twisted, not with sadness, not with heartbreak. Those emotions had died a long time ago, drowned beneath years of her scorn, her deception, her endless condescension. I had known. Of course, I had known. Laura had never been good at hiding things. Not really. The late-night meetings, the sudden, unexplained purchases, the way she would roll her eyes when I so much as spoke to her. It wasn't about love. It was about power. She got off on deception, on the thrill of being untouchable. She had spent years making me feel like nothing. But tonight, that ended. I remained still, watching, waiting. Every move they made, every touch, every whisper, I committed it to memory. Not because it hurt. No, I was past that. But because I wanted her to think she had gotten away with it. I wanted her to believe, for just a little longer, that she was in control. Because the moment she thought she had won would be the moment I struck. I stepped back from the window, letting the night swallow me whole. The wind had picked up, rustling the trees around the cottage, making the place feel even more isolated. Perfect. Inside, their laughter turned softer, more intimate. I could picture Laura leaning in, brushing her lips against his, teasing him just the way she used to tease me, before I became invisible to her. I could storm in right now, flip the table, make a scene. That's what she would expect. That's what she would be ready for. Laura thrived on conflict. She was a master at turning blame around, playing the victim even while she sank the knife in. If I lost my temper, she'd twist the narrative, make me look pathetic. No, that wasn't how this was going to play out. I forced a calm breath and stepped away from the cottage, slipping into the darkness. There was still work to do before the curtain fell on Laura's little performance. I had spent weeks preparing, ever since the first suspicions became certainty. It wasn't just about punishing her for cheating. No, this was bigger. This was about control, about making sure she felt, for the first time in her life, completely powerless. I moved through the trees, silent as a shadow. The cottage was deep in the woods, a little getaway we'd bought years ago, back when we still pretended we were in love. It had been my sanctuary once, a place to escape the chaos of life. Now, it was nothing more than a stage for the final act of our marriage. I had planned this down to the last detail. The cameras were already in place, tiny, undetectable, hidden in the corners of the room. I'd been watching for weeks, letting Laura dig her own grave. Every touch, every kiss, every whisper was captured. And when the time was right, those recordings would go exactly where they needed to. But that was just the beginning. I reached my car, parked just out of sight. Inside was everything I needed. The documents, the financial records, the proof of what she'd been doing behind my back. Not just the cheating, but the lies, the money siphoned from our joint accounts, the little gifts she'd bought for her lovers while she laughed at me for being too stupid to notice. She thought she had the upper hand. She thought she was going to leave me with nothing. She had no idea I was about to take everything from her. But not yet. First, I wanted her to enjoy her little moment of triumph. I wanted her to believe, for just a little while longer, that she had one. I let them have their fun. I watched from the cameras as Laura melted into him, as if she were some lovesick teenager and not a married woman in her late 30s with a history of using people until they were empty. Her lover, let's call him Nathan, was predictable. The type who thought he was untouchable, cocky, arrogant, probably convinced she was going to leave me for him. Maybe she even told him that. Maybe she spun him the same story she used to give me, that I was cold, that I didn't satisfy her, that she had no choice but to seek comfort elsewhere. I almost laughed. They thought they were alone, wrapped in their illusion. They had no idea I was about to shatter it. I took out my phone and typed a message. Short, simple, deliberate. Me, hey Laura. Surprise. I hit send. Inside the cottage, I watched as Laura's phone vibrated on the coffee table. She ignored it at first, too busy playing her little game. But then it buzzed again, and again. Her face twisted in annoyance as she reached for it. Then, she read my message. And just like that, The color drained from her face. I saw her eyes flick to the window, to the door. Her breath hitched. She sat up straight, like an animal suddenly aware it was being hunted. Nathan noticed. He said something to her, grinning like an idiot, but she barely heard him. She was too busy scanning the room, her fingers tightening around her phone. She knew. She knew I was watching. And that was when the real fun began. Laura shot up from the couch, so fast that Nathan barely had time to react. "What's wrong?" he asked, lounging back, completely unaware of the storm brewing inside her. She didn't answer. Her eyes darted around the room, searching, her fingers white-knuckling her phone. I could see it all through the hidden cameras, the way her breathing turned shallow, the way her body tensed like a cornered animal. She wasn't afraid of being caught. No, Laura was never one to feel guilt. She was afraid of losing. She spun toward Nathan, her voice a hiss. "You have to go. Now." He laughed. The cocky bastard laughed. "Relax, babe. What's the big deal?" Laura turned her phone toward him, showing him my message. I wished I could hear them, but I didn't need audio to know what was happening. Nathan's easy confidence cracked just a little, but he shrugged it off. "So what?" He sent a text. Big deal. He had no idea who he was dealing with. Laura did. She knew I wasn't the type to make empty threats. She knew that if I had sent that message, it meant she had already lost control. I sent another. "Me. Smile for the camera." She gasped, spun around. Her head snapped up to the corners of the room. She knows. Nathan finally sat up, rubbing his face. "What the hell is going on?" She ignored him, her fingers tapping furiously on her phone. She was probably trying to call me. I let it ring, let her stew in that rising panic. Then, I sent the next message. "Me. Check your email." She froze, because she knew that whatever was waiting for her there, it would be something she couldn't talk her way out of. And she was right. Laura's hands shook as she opened her email. I had timed it perfectly. Just seconds before, I had hit send. Inside her inbox, a message from me sat at the top, subject line simple and damning. "I know everything." She hesitated. I saw it in the way she clutched her phone tighter, her breath shallow. For the first time in her life, she was afraid. Nathan leaned over, still clueless, still believing this was nothing more than some jealous husband throwing a tantrum. "What is this?" he muttered, squinting at the screen. Laura didn't answer. She tapped the email, and the moment it opened, I watched as the blood drained from her face. Inside, neatly organized, were all the receipts. Screenshots of her texts with Nathan. Pictures of the two of them together. Some taken inside our house in our bed. Bank statements showing the money she had siphoned from our accounts, the gifts she had bought him. And, of course, video clips from the hidden cameras. Evidence. Cold. Undeniable. Nathan's expression shifted. He leaned in, his smirk fading as he took in the sheer weight of what was on that screen. He hadn't signed up for this. He thought he was just having fun with another man's wife. He didn't realize he was stepping into a carefully laid trap. Laura clutched her phone like it was a grenade about to go off. Her head snapped up, her eyes darting wildly. She knew I was outside. She knew I was close. Her fingers tapped out a reply. "Laura, we need to talk. Please. Where are you?" I let her wait. The panic was setting in now, spreading through her like poison. She deserved it. After a full minute, I sent my response. "Me. I'm closer than you think." I watched through the cameras as she spun toward the window, her breath coming in sharp gasps. And then, ever so slowly, I stepped out of the shadows and into the firelight's glow, letting her see me. Her eyes locked onto mine through the glass. And for the first time in our entire marriage, Laura was completely, utterly powerless. Laura's breath hitched the moment she saw me. Her eyes widened, lips parting slightly, but no words came out. She just stood there, frozen, as if she had been caught in a snare she never even saw coming. Nathan followed her gaze, turning his head toward the window. He squinted into the darkness, trying to make sense of the shadowy figure outside. Me. I took my time. I wanted them to feel this. Stepping forward, I let the porch light hit my face, my expression cold and unreadable. No anger, No wild accusations, just a steady, measured presence. Control. Laura finally snapped out of her trance and grabbed Nathan's arm. "We have to go," she whispered, her voice barely carrying through the glass. Nathan scoffed, still playing the tough guy. "Seriously? This is what you're scared of?" He turned back to me and smirked. "What, dude? You gonna stand out there all night? You look like a damn psycho." I smiled. Not wide, not forced. Just enough for him to notice. Then, I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a small flash drive. I held it up between two fingers, letting the firelight catch it. Laura's expression collapsed. She knew what was on it. Nathan, still cocky, rolled his eyes. "What, man? You got some secret documents on there?" I didn't respond. I just tossed the drive onto the porch and turned my attention back to Laura. "It's all in there," I said evenly. "Every lie, every stolen dollar, every disgusting little secret you thought you could hide." She swallowed hard, her body visibly trembling now. "Listen, we can talk about this." I cut her off. "No, you listen." I took a slow step closer. "You don't get to lie your way out of this one. You don't get to cry, or manipulate, or turn this around on me. It's done." Nathan, who still didn't fully grasp what was happening, scoffed. "Yeah? So what? You're gonna post our texts online? Call the cops? Sue her? Big deal, man. You need to move on." I let the silence stretch between us before I finally spoke again. "No," I said simply. "I'm going to ruin her." Laura's face crumpled. She knew I wasn't bluffing. The fear in her eyes was delicious. And I was just getting started. Nathan shifted uncomfortably, his earlier arrogance cracking under the weight of the silence. He could tell now. This wasn't some jealous husband throwing a tantrum. This was something worse. Something cold. Calculated. Laura took a hesitant step forward, her voice a forced whisper. "We don't have to do this, okay? Let's talk. We can fix this." I tilted my head, studying her. She was still trying to manipulate me. Even now, when I held all the cards, she thought she could weasel her way out. Pathetic. "You don't understand," I said, my voice calm, almost amused. "There's nothing to fix." I turned my gaze to Nathan. "You think she cares about you?" I let out a small chuckle. "She's been stealing from me to buy you gifts, sure. But guess what? I traced every transfer, every fraudulent charge. Want to guess where that evidence is now?" Nathan's smirk vanished. "Your precious Laura has been siphoning money for months. And not just from me." I reached into my coat again, pulling out a thin folder. I let it drop onto the wooden porch, where it landed with a soft thud. Laura's entire body stiffened. She knew what was in there before she even picked it up. I watched as she slowly bent down and flipped it open with trembling fingers. The color drained from her face as her eyes darted over the neatly compiled documents. Bank records, credit card statements, emails, proof that she had also been skimming money from her employer. Nathan leaned over her shoulder to look, and when he saw what was inside, he stepped away like she was radioactive. "You," Nathan stammered, shaking his head. "What the hell is this?" "Fraud," I answered. "Embezzlement. Pretty serious charges, wouldn't you say?" I met Laura's horrified stare. "You know how I got those? Your boss gave them to me. He's been suspicious for months, but I connected the dots for him." I smirked. "The authorities will be getting their copies in the morning." Laura gasped. No, you can't." "Oh, but I can." I leaned in just slightly. "And I will." She started shaking her head violently. She was cracking. "Please," she whispered. "Please, we can work this out." Now she was begging. Now she was playing the victim. Now she wanted mercy. I smiled. "Here's the deal, Laura. You have two choices." Her breath hitched. "One, I send everything. The bank fraud, the stolen money, the videos, the texts. Not just to your boss, not just to the police, but to your family, your friends, everyone you know. You will be destroyed." She swallowed hard, her fingers tightening around the folder. "Or two." I let the words hang, letting her desperation mount. "Or two," she finally whispered. "You disappear." My voice was like ice. "Leave. Sign the divorce papers tonight and get the hell out of my life. No fight, No lawyers, no alimony. You walk away with nothing. Her lips parted, her breath coming fast and shallow. Nathan took another step back. He had clearly realized he was not Laura's escape plan anymore. I crossed my arms and let my next words sink in. You have 1 hour to decide. Then, without another word, I turned and walked away. Because no matter which option she chose, Laura's life was already over. I walked back toward my car, not in a rush. I wanted Laura to sit with the weight of her choices. I wanted her to feel it, the walls closing in, the ground crumbling beneath her. The cameras were still rolling inside the cottage. I had my phone in my pocket, streaming the live feed. As I reached my car, I leaned against the door and glanced down at the screen. Laura was pacing, one hand in her hair, the other gripping the folders so tight her knuckles were white. Nathan stood stiffly by the couch, arms crossed, his earlier bravado completely gone. "Tell me you knew about this," Nathan muttered, his voice low but sharp. Laura turned to him, eyes wild. "Of course I didn't know about this." He let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. "So what, you're just a full-time con artist now? You were stealing from your husband and your job?" "It's not like that," she snapped. She stopped, taking a sharp breath. "I just moved some money around, that's all." Nathan gave her a look of pure disgust. "Jesus Christ." Laura clenched her jaw. "Don't look at me like that. You were fine taking the gifts, weren't you? You were fine spending that money." Nathan took another step back. "You're insane." And that's when I saw it. The moment Laura realized she was alone, Nathan wasn't going to save her. He wasn't going to fight for her. He wasn't even going to stay. She turned away from him, her breath ragged, her fingers shaking as she picked up her phone. Another text popped up on my screen. "Laura, please, let's talk. Face to face. Just us. One last time." I smirked. She was still trying to play the game, still clinging to the idea that she had some kind of power. I let her sit in silence for 5 whole minutes before I replied. Meet me outside." Inside the cabin, I watched her straighten, taking a deep breath, forcing herself to look composed. She said something to Nathan. He waved her off, already grabbing his jacket. He was done. He wanted nothing to do with this anymore. Good. Laura hesitated for only a moment before stepping toward the door. I slipped my phone back into my pocket and waited. The next phase was about to begin, and I was going to enjoy every second of it. Laura stepped out onto the porch, her arms wrapped around herself, her breath coming out in short, panicked bursts. She scanned the darkness, eyes darting left and right until they landed on me. I didn't move. I leaned against my car, arms crossed, watching her. She hesitated, then slowly descended the steps, each footstep deliberate, cautious. When she was close enough to see my face clearly, she spoke. "Please, can we just talk?" I let the silence stretch between us. Let her squirm. Let her feel the weight of her own downfall. Then, finally, I tilted my head. "Talk." Laura licked her lips, her usual sharpness dulled by fear. I know I messed up." Her voice wavered, but it wasn't sadness. It was desperation. She still thought she could fix this. "But you don't have to do this. We can figure something out. You don't really want to ruin my life, do you?" I chuckled, slow and low. "You think this is about wanting to ruin you?" I stepped toward her, watching her flinch. "Laura, you did this to yourself?" She shook her head rapidly. No, I didn't." She stopped herself, biting her lip, trying to pick her next words carefully, trying to manipulate me. "Old habits die hard." "You never loved me," she said suddenly, switching tactics. "Not really. You never paid attention to me, never made me feel wanted. I had to go somewhere else to feel like I mattered." I let out a slow exhale. The blame game. Predictable. "You're not the victim here," I said, my voice even. "You're not some neglected wife who had no choice. You're a liar, a thief, a user." I took another step forward, my presence towering over her. "And now, you're a woman with no options." Her face twisted in fury. "You bastard." I pulled out my phone and held it up. Her entire confession had just been recorded. Her eyes went wide. I smirked. Thanks for that. That'll go nicely with the rest of my collection. She staggered back. I had her, and she knew it. Time's almost up, Laura, I said, pocketing my phone. What's it gonna be? She swallowed, her eyes darting toward the cottage, as if there was still some escape. There wasn't. There never was. Laura's breath was shallow, her fingers twitching like she wanted to grab my phone and smash it. But she wouldn't dare. Not now. She had no more moves left. No lies, no tricks, no excuses. I watched as she crumbled. Her shoulders slumped first, then her head dipped slightly, just enough to tell me she knew this was over. But she wasn't crying. No, Laura never cried unless it served her. Right now, she knew there was no point. She exhaled sharply through her nose and straightened just a little. Her voice was cold. You really want to do this? Destroy me? I smiled. You destroyed yourself. A bitter laugh escaped her lips. God, you're so fucking dramatic. I let that one slide. Let her pretend she still had some control, some dignity left to salvage. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a thin envelope. I held it out between two fingers. Her divorce papers. I want them signed, I said simply. Tonight. She glanced down at the envelope like it was a snake. And if I don't? I let out a short chuckle. You really want to find out? Her jaw tightened, but she didn't argue. She just snatched the envelope from my hand, gripping it so hard I thought she might tear it in half. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then, finally, she whispered, I hate you. I leaned in, just enough to make sure she heard me clearly. Good. Then I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there in the cold. She had an hour to make her choice, but I already knew what it would be. I waited in my car, watching the clock, giving her time to stew. She had 1 hour. I knew Laura. She would drag it out until the last possible second, not because she thought she could win, but because losing on someone else's terms killed her. Sure enough, 59 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Laura, it's done. I didn't reply. Instead, I stepped out of the car and walked back to the porch. The cottage door was open just a crack, the dim glow of the fireplace flickering inside. I pushed it open fully and stepped in. Laura sat at the dining table, the signed divorce papers in front of her, the pen still clutched in her trembling hand. Her mascara had smudged slightly, not from crying, but from the sheer rage I could feel radiating off her. Nathan was gone. She was alone. Good. I stepped forward, picked up the papers, and flipped through them slowly, deliberately. Every signature was there, every initial in place. No loopholes, no last-minute attempts at trickery. She had really done it. I smirked. Smart choice. She clenched her jaw, her hands balling into fists in her lap. Just take them and go. I held her gaze for a moment longer, then folded the papers neatly and slid them into my coat pocket. Oh, I'm leaving, I said. But you? You're going to disappear, just like we agreed. Her nostrils flared. And if I don't? I pulled out my phone and tapped the screen. The folder of evidence opened instantly. The bank fraud, the affair, the videos, the messages, all of it, just one click away from being sent to everyone. She went completely still. You have nothing now, Laura, I said softly. No money, no reputation, no friends. I tilted my head. No way out. Her breath came faster now, her whole body trembling in barely contained rage. You sick son of a... I cut her off. Careful. Her lips parted, but she bit back whatever venomous insult was on the tip of her tongue. She knew she had no leverage left. I leaned down slightly, just enough to whisper in her ear. You destroyed yourself. I just made sure everyone saw it. Then, without another word, I turned and walked out the door, leaving her with nothing. The night air felt sharper as I walked away from the cottage, each step lighter than the last. It was done. Laura was nothing now. I got into my car and placed the divorce papers on the passenger seat, letting my fingers drum against the steering wheel as I stared at the dark road ahead. I could still feel her rage, her silent screams echoing behind me. She wanted revenge. She wanted to claw back control, but she wouldn't, because I had made sure she couldn't. I pulled out my phone and tapped a few buttons. A pre-scheduled transfer initiated. Laura's access to our joint accounts? Revoked. The second the money hit my separate account, she would have exactly $0 to her name. Next, I sent a short message to our landlord. Me? Lease is terminated. She won't be staying. Laura's name wasn't on the lease, only mine. The moment I cut the agreement, she was out. No house, no home, no place to run. Then, the final touch. I opened up an encrypted email and hit send. The email shot off to her boss. Inside, every document proving her little embezzlement scheme. I wasn't pressing charges myself. I didn't have to. The company would handle that on their own. And Laura? She'd have no idea when it would happen. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe next week. Maybe in a month. Just when she thought she had a chance to start over. But one day, she'd hear that knock on the door. And it wouldn't be me standing there. I smirked, tossing my phone onto the passenger seat. Laura was erased. And for the first time in years, I was free.